Hello, this is Frank from M.I.T.A. You probably know me, hopefully personally. If not, hi to all of you. The problem is, I can tell you this right away. When I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the comments. However, I will read those comments. So please use the comment section and please share some love if you found something interesting here, of course. And this is a little Thanksgiving live stream that I want to do actually just as a test live stream, because I definitely want to go more into Facebook Live in general and share some of the M.I.T.A techniques and some of the compositions really, and how I did them using interval theory. So that's the main purpose of this little webinar, or let's call this a live stream. It's not really a webinar, but I still want to give out some value, of course. So let's see. We have the Overtone series. Hopefully, many of you know the Overtone series. If not, let me show you this little picture. We don't need to read the preface. That is actually an ebook right now here. This ebook is available in the membership. But I'm just taking these information here in order to, show you what this is all about with the Overtone series, which is perfectly fine because I'm the author of this ebook. So who cares? Alrighty, so let's start right away. We have, and by the way, before I start, I will keep going probably for, let's say, 10 minutes right now, then I will stop sharing my screen and I will go to the comments in order to interact a little bit, engage with you in case you have questions and stuff. So right now, if you type anything, as I said, in the comments, I can't see it as long as I'm sharing my screen. So please bear with me, but I'm really trying to get back to all of the questions here. Okay, perfect. So that's the Overtone series right here. At least the first 4 octaves. There are more than 4 octaves, of course, but things get a little bit crazy and out of hand when it comes to pitches, the higher you go. And even these guys here, these are not in perfect pitch anymore, right? So they are kind of in between scale tone -7 and 7 to the fundamental. So this is hard to determine, of course, but for now, for our purpose here, in order to get some technique across, let's just let's just assume that these are really scale tones using the pitches of the scale tones. So what can we say about the Overtone series when we just look at this as an observation? This is a series that appears in nature. So that is not something that people have made up. This is really something that humans have observed from nature. Why is that important? That means that your ear, as part of the evolution, your ear really gets adapted to this Overtone series, which means you hear this thing in nature all the time, which is basically also noise. What is very true when you listen to the sea, the waves. That is nothing else than white noise or pink noise, and that is a very nice sound, very very pleasurable for the ear. Mainly, your ear has adopted to nature over the centuries. And that is the reason why the Overtone series works great in music, because it sounds good to the human ear. So you want to use it, of course. As an observation, we have different octaves right here. And this is a very interesting fact. So when you look at the different octaves, you see that actually more complexity is added with each octave. So in the lowest octave, we just hear, if we pretend that the C note down here is our fundamental, right? And we play this note, then this is the series on the C root tone, of course. So in the first octave, we really hear nothing in between from the starting point and the next octave. And that is the first interesting hint of how you want to use the overtone series. So this little octave down here, that is what we consider the bass range. And the bass range, that is of course not the only range that a bass instrument can play in, obviously not, but it is definitely the range where when you put a note into that range, it most often appears as the root tone. It depends on the vertical structure above, but you want to put your bass notes in that register. And that's the main reason why we write our root cycles. Probably not all of you know what I mean by the term root cycles by now, but we will go into this in other live streams. So we write the root cycles into this lowest register right here. So the moment we go into the second octave, we see another guy pop up in the middle. And guess what? That's the perfect fifth. And that is a very good friend when it comes to the root tone, mainly because the root and the perfect fifth, they melt together very easily. All guitar players know that, because that is commonly known as a power chord on the guitar. Sounds great when you put some distortion on it, because these two notes, they just melt together and you hear well, the root tone, which then becomes a bit stronger. That's the main purpose of this perfect fifth right here. So then if we add the perfect fourth, we get to the next doubling of our root tone in this position of the middle C right here. That is middle C. And this is very interesting because from this middle C, we step into the third octave, and this brings in chord tones. Chord tones from a major dominant seventh chord. It's very funny actually that there is no minor structure, no minor triad in the Overtone series. It does not appear in nature. So people, I've read some articles about that actually. They are also on Wikipedia, I believe, where people try to explain minor triads with the Overtone series and the reflection of it basically, which becomes the undertone series or the subharmonic series. And this is a little bit experimental really, because the subharmonic series does not appear in nature. So this is really something that humans constructed out of this Overtone series. But I'm digressing here. So the point is, these are chord tones, right? And a funny thing is, right now, when you just look at the first three octaves, you see that the intervals appear first in an octave. That's the strongest interval that we have in general, of course. That is also why in orchestration, you probably know this, there is something that is being called the big octave when it comes to melodic writing. And very often you hear this in, for example, the first violins and then the second violins or the violas doubling the lead line exactly one octave below. And this, as a result, you hear the top line mainly because your ear always goes to the lead line, right? That's the easiest line to pick up for the ear. It's the lead line. And then you don't really hear the octave, but you hear the lead line with a bit more body to it and a bit more strength to it. So that is why it's called the big octave, really, which is a good technique if you want to emphasize and stress a line. It's very often, very commonly done in scores. So then we have the perfect fifth, right? Then we have the perfect fourth. Then we have the major third. Then we have a minor third. Now you can recognize a pattern or a structure, not really a pattern, but a structure. And that is, we start with big intervals and we come to closer intervals. So big intervals in general are stronger because they appear earlier in the Overtone series. And the strongest intervals come first in the Overtone series, right? So let me ask you a question. And I actually can't really see the chat, because right now this would be an amazing opportunity to see the chat. I will check it later. But I want to ask you, when you look at the overtone series right here on C, and you go to the piano and you play two notes only, and that is the C and the B flat right here. These two guys. Now, how do you determine the root tone? If you only play these two notes, independent of the actual pitch, which means you don't have to play them in the bass register down here. Play them anywhere, really. It doesn't matter. It's just the relation between the two guys here. What of these two guys is the root tone and why? Well, actually, in order to determine the root tone to any structure, really, the overtone series comes in very handy. And let me tell you why. The point is, the C and the B flat, these two notes, they can build or create two intervals. The first interval is what we call a 2, because they are two chromatic steps apart, like a B flat to the C, that is a 2. Or they can go to the position change, and that, of course, becomes a 10, right? So now we only have to ask ourselves, well, what interval is stronger then, a 2 or a 10? And you can determine the stronger interval just by looking at the overtone series and just have a look at what interval comes first. So let's see, that is a 12, obviously, that's the octave. This guy, that's a 7, that's a 5. That right here is a 4. If we stick to this note C, then we see, well, that's from C to G, that's a 7 again. Well, boom. Now from this C to the B flat up here, that is a 10. And then comes the 2, right? So the 10 is a stronger interval than the 2. And this, when you look at the strongest interval, you see that the bottom note is the root of this interval. So in this case, absolutely, it's the note C. C is the root tone when you hit these two guys alone. Whenever you hit a 2, the top note is the root tone. And that is only because of the overtone series, right? So then, wow, we almost have 10 minutes. If you guys want me to keep going, I will probably move on for a few more minutes, and then I will look into the chat. And if you don't have any more time for me babbling about the overtone series, have a good night. Okay, so when we start from this guy here, and I want to look into the octave number 4 right now. That is a very interesting octave as well, because this, for the first time, describes scale tones. Okay, and we have actually two scales in between these two notes here, the C and the C above. When we look at the most characteristic scale tone in here, probably this is the 4 plus, which is the F sharp on a C root tone. So obviously this gives us a Lydian sound to it, okay? And then right here, these two guys, they are really both in the overtone series. You can't determine, okay, that's a -7 or it's a natural 7 for sure. There are no exact pitches up there. So they are kind of in existence, both of them. And that is why when we refer to scale tones, we really have two scales going on up here. And that's the Lydian scale, when we pretend that this guy is a natural 7th, or the Lydian dominant, when we pretend that this guy up here is a dominant 7, okay? The very interesting thing that these scale tones show is that when you construct chords, complex chords, so to speak, 9th chords, 11th and 13th chords, you won't hear scale tone 3 and scale tone 4 at the same time, because they are not appearing in the overtone series at the same time, right? we have scale tone 3, and we have a 4 plus. And that is interesting because when you look at really any jazz standard, and I actually challenge you, try to find me a tune that consists of an 11th chord that has also a natural 3 in it. And that is not an 11 plus, right? So a natural 3 and a natural 11. That is a chord structure that does not really sound good because these two notes do not appear at the same time in the overtone series. So when it comes to chord structures, it's really a good rule of thumb to avoid having scale tone 3 and natural 4 together in a structure. So you want to have either natural 3 and a 4 plus, which becomes an 11 plus, of course, then, when we have scale tone -7 as support. Or you want to have, whenever you want to hear a natural scale tone 4 or 11, make this scale tone 3 into a -3. Then it works. Very cool stuff. So that is actually, wow, we've made it to page 1 in 30 minutes. Yeah, but probably that's my personal problem because I'm babbling too much about these things here. But I really find this to be very interesting because the overtone series, I heavily rely on the overtone series when I work with intervals in general, when I don't work with a diatonic system anymore. And you want to be able to mix it up, to do both, of course. I'm not saying that diatonic writing is not good. I'm doing it all the time. And I will actually share you a little example right now because part of this little live stream test is also that I'm sharing my computer audio. So let me do this right away.